Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we're reviewing Severance Season 1, and today we're on episode 3 titled In Perpetuity. If you haven't watched this episode yet, we recommend checking it out before continuing to listen to the rest of our conversation. Okay, Sarah, kick us off with episode summary for episode 4.
Mark takes the team on a field trip, but Helly continues to rebel. A deteriorating Petey struggles to tell Mark about Lumen's misdeeds.
All right. A field trip. We go on a field trip this episode.
So fun. We love field trips.
Yeah, so fun. Very fun. Lots of things to talk about on said field trip. Well, let's kick off with our episode titles of choice for episode 3. What was yours?
Mine is Fortress of Solitude.
Nice. I love it. Very good. Very good. My episode title is Mouthwall.
Yep.
Okay, let's dive in and talk a little bit about our thoughts about this third episode of the season. The world continues to open up and expand. Sarah, I'm intrigued to hear your thoughts and reactions.
Yeah, I think I don't know what to do with this show. Is kind of where I'm at. I'm not feeling particularly invested in this show, which is not how I expected to feel because everybody loves this show. So I just assumed that I was also going to love it. And I'm not having a bad time watching it. There's a lot that happens in this episode that's quite good. But I'm just left wondering what we're doing and where we're going. And I want to feel a sense of forward momentum. I want there to be something, a goal that someone is working toward. And we don't have that. And so I'm feeling kind of aimless, and I don't know what we're doing. So I'm having a hard time with this show, which I did not expect to have. So I don't know. There's a lot that's good that happens in this episode, though. The field trip is so much fun. I'm enjoying getting to know Helly and Irv and Dylan some more, and we get to see Bert again, which is just amazing. He is quickly becoming my favorite. So there's a lot of good stuff that happens in this, but I think at the end I was just going like, okay, like what are we doing? Where are we going? And I'm sure a lot of things will make more sense in the future once I have more context, but right now I am feeling aimless, and I don't like that feeling. So I'm struggling a little bit with this show. So I need to reorient my expectations, and I'm having a hard time doing that because what I want is not what the show is doing, and so I have to like reset myself. And yeah, I'm struggling a little bit, but it's fine. There's good stuff that happens that we could talk about. So anyway, Jen, what did you think about this episode?
This is going to be such a fun journey. I'm so excited. Yeah, this is the point in the show when I watched it the first time where I started to get frustrated because we are only collecting more questions and we are not getting clues or progress towards answers of any kind. And honestly, the first 2 episodes, the second time watching it, I was like, okay, maybe I was in the wrong headspace last time. Maybe I was so focused on trying to figure it out, whatever it is, that I couldn't like embrace the experience. But watching this episode, I was getting frustrated again because the show continues to open up the world, which is very interesting, but we just are getting more questions about things that don't seem to make sense. And I've been thinking a lot about game design principles around the way that the level of difficulty drives engagement. And when you give the player these moments of uh, insight or feeling of progress, then they stay even when the game is getting more difficult. And there's this very delicate balance between making the game too difficult that the player leaves and they're like, I'm out of here. Not, I don't feel like I can actually do this game. And then the other end of the spectrum is that it's too easy and it's boring. And there's this really fine line of constantly tuning and adjusting how long it takes to reach those levels of unlocking a new level or progressing or leveling up in the game. And I think about that concept a lot with movies, TV shows, all that kind of stuff. And I think in general with TV, the timing and threshold of how long we as viewers are willing to stay even when we don't have that insight, I think is longer than it used to be. So I think there's been many shows that have done like really long build-ups and then a big satisfying finale and it all makes sense and blah blah blah. This show is doing something very similar as well, but I have like no feeling of progress and no feeling of uh being able to see that I'm uncovering new clues about this world. And that I get frustrated by. So I think overall there's some interesting things that we can talk about with the break room scene with Helly. There's an interesting board meeting that happens, but like once again, we are learning new things about the world that continue to drive questions with no feeling of answers for right now.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you make around like video game design, because I was even thinking about this show and kind of my experience of it. And if we weren't doing the podcast, this would be one of those shows where I watch an episode or two and then it probably just stays in my to watch list for a few
Mm.
months until I'm finally like, okay, we're just going to finish it. I'm just going to cross it off the list. I'm just going to get it done. Like that is kind of where I'm at right now with this show, just because it doesn't feel like we're making meaningful progress toward a goal. And again, that's I have an incorrect expectation for the show. And the show is not interested in giving me what I want. And it's moving at its own pace, which is interesting. And I think the other thing that I've been kind of wrestling with is that I'm having trouble, I think, with Mark as the central protagonist that we see this world through, um, because he's so bland. Like he's kind of vanilla. He's really passive, and I understand why he is the appropriate uh, protagonist for this type of story, but man, I am struggling. So when we're in the office and Helly is trying to escape,
Mm-hmm.
or Dylan is doing what he's doing, or Irv is just spouting company propaganda, like I'm having so much fun with those characters because they're just fun to be around and they're so vibrant and interesting. And then there's Mark, and he is starting to make choices both inside and outside of Lumen, and that's kind of fascinating. But they're just these little tiny, like half a decision or like half a step. We're not even baby stepping at this point. It's just like a little tiny shuffle forward in progress. And so I think that's the other part is I am a little frustrated maybe with Mark as the protagonist, but he is the right protagonist for this show. I cognitively understand that. But as I'm watching, I'm just like, Okay, when are we going to be done with Mark so I can go watch an interesting character? So I'm very curious to see what they do with Mark, and because he is changing, he is starting to make some little decisions, and so I imagine that's going to snowball at some point in time, and that would be more exciting to watch. But I think having a kind of bland protagonist leading the way is making it a little bit harder for me to feel as invested in this show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, I'm most invested in Helly's rebellion.
Yes,
um,
right?
Honestly, this whole show is just like following Helly to figure out how she's gonna like prison break from here. That would be so fun. It would be so thrilling and exciting, and seeing she's so creative and so like punchy and dynamic that that'd be a great time. I would watch that show. Uh, so the other interesting thing about her storyline is that we continue to see her try, but it's kind of like slowly littered throughout, and then there's again no feeling of progress in that storyline as well. So I'm just there's just more questions. Not a lot of like that feeling of progress in either direction. And then I think the not being able to connect with the characters is I think another interesting dimension of this, which it's interesting. I don't know if that was part of the intentional like writing of the show, is to not have this really compelling protagonist. But there's a trade-off that's made there. There's like this larger point perhaps around like the corporate zombies that have been brainwashed into buying into this system, and they are pawns being used by Lumen, but also we need something to latch onto to navigate this world for an effective story. So there's some interesting trade-offs that are being made there. Honestly, I'm entertaining myself by just thinking about the parallels into the real world, and I wonder if for a lot of the people that watched the show and had a great time for most of the way or all of the way through the show, I'm curious to know if like where their mental headspaces spent the most time mulling on with the show. Is it that connection point to these real world dynamics? Because there's so much that this almost feels like an allegory, and we're learning about the rules of the world of this allegorical world. But like, where are we going? What's the arc?
And the world is so cool, and
Interesting.
this premise is really really interesting, but I feel like you can only go so far with that. Because I, I don't know. I just don't know where we're going. And I think that is frustrating in a show. And sometimes it's absolutely the right thing to do. And like you said, there are some shows that it'll just be like ambiguous for a while, and then all of a sudden everything comes together, and it's great, it's brilliant. And I'm hoping that turn will happen somewhere in this season. I don't know, we'll see. But I think if we are working toward tearing down the evil corporation, then the boring, bland, vanilla, everyday man is the perfect protagonist for that, because nobody sees it coming. And so I think in that sense, if that's the end goal, we don't know what the end goal is, or I don't, because I haven't seen the entire season, then like Mark makes perfect sense. So I think that's just what I keep telling myself, is that Mark is almost like a sleeper agent, and we just haven't seen him wake up yet. Uh, and maybe that's not where we're going, but that's what I kind of keep wondering, because otherwise these other characters are much more interesting to spend time with. And I love Helly's prison break attempts. They're so fun.
Mm-hmm.
I so want her to be successful. And I do appreciate that we keep seeing these different attempts that she makes. And it reveals something interesting about her and her tenacity, and honestly like stubbornness, which in this context is a good thing. But I think it's also in revealing something interesting about Mark too, even though I just said that he's super vanilla and uninteresting, and I stand by that. But we're seeing his empathy toward Helly, and he knows what their security measures are in Lumen so well. He has those just at the top of mind. And so I do wonder if there's just a lot more beneath the surface to Mark that we just haven't seen yet. So maybe the vanilla bland version of him is just a front, and there's a lot going on beneath the surface where he is maybe more disgruntled and maybe even more strategic than we've seen so far. I don't know. I don't know.
Mm,
We'll see.
yeah. Yeah. A grand reveal about how he was intentionally orchestrating so much of this the whole time. Uh yeah, the theories are fun. And we will see where it all unfolds. Uh should we talk about some of the specifics, some of the sequences that were prominent in this episode?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. I mean, we've got to talk about the museum chaos,
Yeah. The
the
field trip.
perpetuity weed. What are your thoughts about all of that? What do you think it means, if anything? What do you think it says? Why was this part of this world?
I just want to know how big this building is. Like, what? You have a whole replica of this dude's house in your perpetuity wing somewhere? Like, are you kidding me? Is this like the Mary Poppins bag of office buildings? What is this? What is going on here? Um and I also just loved the bingo and how upset Irv got that they were playing this bingo game in the perpetuity wing. And so those moments when Irv is giving this tour and he's having so much fun, and Dylan is just there to like wreak havoc, and Helly is hating every second of it. Like, that was just so much fun to just see them interacting with each other and seeing how these characters kind of like bounce off of each other and make each other mad and all of that. So that was so much fun. I don't know what it means because I don't know. But it was fun watching them play bingo. And I also would have wanted a bingo sheet if I had to go into the perpetuity wing. So I
Hmm.
get it.
Yeah, I forgot how funny some of these group dynamics are, and there's so many like fun little lines back and forth, and comments and different personalities that collide up with each other. So that's always really fun to see. I kind of forgotten that part of the show. Um, I you know I don't know what it means. More questions to add to the collection. I was thinking a lot about how before they go, Irv gives this whole speech around how like history makes us someone. It gives us a context and a shape. And so Helly, we are going to the perpetuity wing because you're part. He says you're part of a history now. And again, I'm entertaining myself by thinking about this like relationship to real world dynamics and just how much like the ethos and mission of the companies that we work for are sometimes so like uh, built up to be really big and feel very significant. Like it's supposed to give us a sense of purpose. I think that there's at one point where Irv has a conversation with Mark around like, oh, it seems like maybe she's lacking purpose here. It's a deeper meaning she craves. So he's actually the one that suggests the perpetuity wing in the hopes that it creates a sense of satisfaction or a contentedness for Helly to stay and no longer try and break out of prison. And I thought that whole bit was interesting because I think it is a very strong, prominent part of working at a corporate, large organization. Honestly, any organization of any kind, there's often this like we are working on something bigger than ourselves narrative that is used to inspire and it's highly effective at inspiring, but also can be really menacing when it's like kind of your brain washed into it. And we're seeing that this group is figuring out how to get Helly to be obedient by using some of that ethos and mission driven language. And that in and of itself was really fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good, and that you see how bought in Irv is to it too. So he has enough emotional intelligence to understand that Helly needs to connect to the work that they're doing, or she needs to connect somehow so that she's not miserable there. But he's so bought in that he thinks that this is going to solve all the problems when it's actually not. It's actually only going to make things worse. And it's so creepy, the perpetuity wing. Like, what? That was terrible. I the second that like they walk in there, I was like, oh no, this is not it. This is not inspirational. This is kind of terrifying. But when you're drinking the Kool-Aid, it's the greatest thing in the world. And so that contrast between Helly and Irv is really fascinating to explore.
Yeah, and I feel like that dynamic is so present in our workplace dynamics too. Like you have those team members or those coworkers that really are bought in. You know, they really believe and feel a sense of connection to something where you're maybe new or you're a little bit more jaded and cynical, and you're like, really, this is what is doing it for you, and that spectrum is really fascinating to see. And I think like Dylan and Mark are land somewhere in between. So we get to see a full spectrum of reactions to how much Kool-Aid have we drank.
And I love that Dylan just makes fun of it. Like that's so fun to me. And I'm really appreciating his creativity and how that shows up in his work, but also in his communication, and how he does make things fun. I guess it was the last episode where he was sharing all of his little like prizes that he got, and his finger traps, and his the cartoons of him and whatnot. I was like, wow, is he just like a really big kid? But it's there's more there, and he almost has to like turn it into a game or turn it into something fun, otherwise he is going to lose his mind. So I'm curious if there's more that Dylan has in common with Helly than maybe I initially thought, because Dylan doesn't seem to be as bought in. I mean, I don't think anybody is as bought in as Irv is, but Dylan has some questions and some qualms maybe, but he has found a way to cope. And it's kind of interesting because we've had 3 episodes and we've seen Mark's way of trying to get Helly to acclimate. And then in the second episode, we saw kind of Dylan's way of trying to get her to acclimate by showing her the prizes and stuff. And then in this episode, Irv is trying to get her to acclimate through the perpetuity wing and trying to see it through his eyes. And nothing has quite worked. So that's just interesting to think about what might come in the next episode. And will Helly ever acclimate? And then if so, who will be the influence to get her to do so? I don't know. We'll find out.
You're right, yeah, because we're starting to see that Dylan and Helly are forming kind of a connection point. When Mark was out sick in the previous episode, we see that Dylan helped train Helly and was really effective at helping her get up to speed. So do they have potentially more in common in their worldview or how they show up and react to this very strange situation? It will be fun to see how that plays out. It also like makes me wonder, like, what does Mark think about this whole situation as well? Like, I think we have a lot of clarity for the other three characters. Her Irv's clearly bought in and drinking the Kool-Aid and feeling very mission driven about the way that the company is being run and his role in it. We see that Dylan's figuring out, he's kind of that guy that's just like there to get the bag, like get your cash money, get your rewards, and then get out of there, and kind of gamifying it all. Helly's obviously in rebellion, but like, I don't like, what does Mark feel about this whole situation? Um, he just seems pretty neutral so far. Like, has feelings and emotions that are getting shut down, but he doesn't seem too concerned about it. But also, there's these like curiosities that he's having about the map, and even entertaining the thought of that. Like, had Irv been the one to receive the map, he would have turned it in immediately and like ratted it all out, and the fact that Mark is not doing that and really mulling on what this map means, and what the having these questions about the larger organization is interesting in and of itself. The fact that he's kept it quiet. So I was thinking a lot about that too. Like, what does Mark think about this whole situation?
Yeah, and maybe we'll find out. Like that's just
Maybe.
what I'm waiting for, is for Mark to do something. And like he's made little decisions here, but like I want him to make a big decision. I want him to like do something. And we are, instead of cannonballing into the pool, we are very slowly like tiptoeing our way into the pool. So we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what
Yeah.
Mark does.
Yeah. We shall see indeed. Okay, other big things that we wanted to talk about or mention with this episode.
Another question that I have is why, basically, why Mark? His boss lives next to him under a different
Mm-hmm.
name and has a key to his house, and, is constantly inserting herself into his business. Why though? Um, because she was already there when he was a low level employee. So, what is so special about Mark? Again, this is like this weird, he's such a boring vanilla guy. Why him? Why are you devoting so many resources to monitor him? What makes him so special that this company has identified, but I, as a viewer, have not yet identified in him? So, that's the other thing that's making me like, is Mark like internally this like really strategic thinker who is going to break out of the prison and liberate all of the severed people, but he just has to play this really vanilla guy so that he gets access or something? I don't know. So I'm turning Mark into like a sleeper agent in a spy movie because I can't make that make sense.
Oh, I love it. I love where your brain is going with the information that you have. Yeah, it is an interesting question because they seem to really be like tracking and monitoring him very closely as well. And I don't know if it's something maybe with his relationship with Petey, and the fact that Petey um, recently reintegrated. And so like there's the risk that Mark is now a threat. But clearly, this organization understands and is tracking his activity, and monitoring it so closely. So yeah, we will see how that unfolds. But I love where your brain's thinking about with Mark and all of the theories about why him.
Mm-hmm. Because he's just a kind of boring guy. Like, and that, like, it just doesn't make sense. So that's just, there's so many things in this show where I'm like, this does not make sense, but it's what we're doing and it's fine. So here we are.
You keep collecting those questions. Our bucket's getting real big.
Yeah, I think honestly, like, I've kind of just stopped collecting questions because
Mm.
I don't trust that the show is going to answer my questions. So I'm just kind of like, okay, this is happening. It's fine.
Let it wash over you. Yes.
Yeah, we're just here, and then Helly tries to escape and I get excited, and then we go back to Mark, and
Yep.
then the episode's over.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. And then we've like discovered some other strange wings of the building. And then episode's over. one of the like little scenes that I loved was the board meeting, and one we see that Harmony needs to answer to somebody, and we get this like very dripping in honey corporate toxic positivity woman that shows up to like be essentially the voice for the board. But I just love the whole setup of that scene where the board is on speaker and can hear Harmony, but we need this lady apparently to then speak for the board, and Harmony doesn't get to hear. And I just thought that was so funny because there's so much in workplaces that gets lost in translation and like just like entirely unnecessary like people in between that have to like bring the message from somebody somewhere, and so much gets lost in translation, so much gets misinterpreted differently, and seeing the like physical setup of that I just thought was like really funny and tickled me because that happens all the time in corporate spaces.
Yeah, that's a really great point. In that scene, I was also thinking about how difficult it can be to be in middle management too. And we see that in both Mark and now in Harmony too, because she isn't the big boss. And the difficult place that it can be when you're having to manage a team and you have all the responsibility for that, but you also don't have authority really. And you kind of see that in both of these characters who are very, very different and seem to be foes in a lot of ways. And yet they're going through a very similar experience because they are in that awkward middle spot. And so I just found that scene really interesting in that context because we've seen Harmony interact with Mark and how that has gone. And now we have seen Harmony be on the receiving end of what she has dished out to Mark as well. So I'm curious to see how that relationship between these two will continue to be revealed, because I think that there's more similarities there maybe than you would think just looking at them on the surface.
Mm, yeah, no, that's so true. And seeing what different roles they play, because Harmony is very clearly bought into and playing the Lumen game. And Mark is along this trajectory of now discovering this map. He has this connection point with Petey now and will be maybe in rebellion and is on that trajectory. So they have competing priorities, but they like what does that look like for them if they continue to if their paths continue to divert from each other, or do they converge at any point? We will see. We will find out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you brought up Petey, and that's just another question that I've had in the back of my
Yeah.
brain is like, what are we doing with Petey? Basically, all of my questions is either like, why or what are we doing? Um, and so Petey had this like reintegration surgery business. Somebody gave him that surgery. Somebody performed that on him. That is the they that he refers to in this episode. And so I'm glad that he brought that up in this episode, because that's something that I've been wondering is like, somebody performed this procedure on you and then they just kind of let you go? Like that feels not great. So why aren't you with the mystery they that did this to you and do like the reintegration sickness, like heal from that under their care? They're probably more well equipped for this, uh instead of coming and crashing on your friend's couch. Like that just seems like a bad plan. So once again, I don't trust Petey. There's something about him that's like real off to me, and the mysterious they just kind of reinforces my skepticism about that character in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he also shares a bit of insight, which I was been thirsting for, so I held on to that like a precious little crumb. But he tells Mark, "You're murdering people 8 hours a day with the data macro data refinement," which feels like a pretty significant piece of insight. But then we get to see how much of an unreliable like a character he is, because he is going through this healing process, and like he has disconnect with what is reality and which reality he is in. And so just thought that was like a fascinating device of like, we seem to get this piece of this nugget of insight into what's going on, but then we see that that character can't be trusted because of the mental state that he's in. So like that dissonance is, I mean, it's really fascinating and would be really thrilling, but also really frustrating too, because I'm like, oh, my crumb. Oh, just kidding. The crumb came from a place that I don't know if it's even reliable. So do I hold on to this crumb? Like what is actually going on at Lumen? I don't know if Petey even knows fully and is communicating it clearly or properly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I don't know. We will find out,
Yep,
but
we
we
shall.
know Petey is not in a good place. He collapses in that convenience store, and he also sets up a little cliffhanger for us because his phone is ringing in the basement, and Mark has identified that this phone is vibrating. And so we have to ask the question, who's on the phone? Will the show answer that question? We don't know. But we are set up to go watch another episode.
Mm-hmm. That we are. All right. Shall we give out some awards?
Sure, yeah.
All right. The first category is Employee of the Week, given to a character. What is your choice for Employee of the Week this week?
I would like to give it to Milchek for taking his job as a photographer so seriously. Like,
Yeah.
when Mark is giving his announcements, Milchek is putting in work, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, he's doing the squat. He's working the thighs to get the
It's
shot.
impressive. Yeah, you got to get the shot, and he sure did.
But also, I'm like, why are we taking photos? Where are these photos going? What is going on? It's
Mm-hmm.
so, it's so random.
Maybe that's
Uh,
his passion, though. Maybe he is just a passionate photographer.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know what anything is going on in the show, so
That's
it could be
true.
anything. It really could be anything at this point. uh, I'm giving this award to Dylan for supplying the team with bingo cards.
Ah, yes, the bingo cards. One of my favorite parts of this episode.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the second category is move the needle moment. What's your choice?
Mine is Dylan introducing us to Egan Bingo.
Mm, nice. Yep.
Yeah,
It's
our
very
lives are
significant.
now forever changed.
My choice is Helly's break room sequence.
Ooh, yeah.
We heard about the break room, we heard tapes of the break room, and we finally get to see the break room experience. And Milchek again, employee of the week, man, just doing his job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so, so interesting. Okay, the next category is achievement in corporate teas. What is your choice?
Uh, I want to give this to Felicia, who is the lady who works with Bert, when she explains what they were doing. She says they were doing an egg drop challenge in the synergy space. And I just loved that Mad Libs version of a sentence. And I have so many questions for Felicia. So I want to give her this award.
I chose a pretty much very similar one where she uses the S word. She says, tight department like us, got to keep our synergy up.
Nice. Yes.
Oh, the S word.
Gotta love it.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it. All right. What are you looking ahead, excited, hopeful, curious, hoping to see in the next episode?
So I would like to see more of Bert and Felicia because they seem like just delightful people. I would like to see more of Irv because he is a blast. And I want to know more about this beef between O&D and Dylan specifically, why he hates O&D so much. And he mentions O&D trying to stage a coup, and I would like to see that. So the show's probably not going to go there, but to see Christopher Walken leading the charge to overthrow the Lumen Empire, I think would be really fun. So that is what I would like to see.
Yeah. Those are some good lists of things, and we will find out. I literally put in the section, just in all caps, answers. Just need something.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, that's
wet
fair.
my palate a little bit. We're thirsting out here.
Yeah. One little tiny answer. That would be lovely.
Right. Yes. So, a bunch of things happen in the show, and I'm just intrigued to see all of our thoughts and reactions to them as we continue on this journey. Okay, well, this was our review and discussion of episode 3 of Severance. You can find it on Apple TV+. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through Severance Season 1. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts and theories and questions from episode 3. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at tvnspod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss episode 4. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again very soon.